Okay, so here we go. Happy Monday. We switch on and off between Chumash, Parsha, and Jewish history until we've come to the conclusion of our history. Just kidding. That will never end. Although this Parsha is really great. Anyway, let's get back to Jewish history. We ended with Vespasian. Nero dies. Nero is the emperor of Rome. Psychopath, Shiva psychopath. Thank God he dies. Then Vespasian is laying siege to Jerusalem. He ends up being told that in the middle of his siege, he is now emperor, which was predicted by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And we ended saying that Rabbi Vespasian, when he was told the news, was putting on a shoe. I guess he was sitting down, putting on a shoe. And when he was told the news that he's now the emperor, he could not get his shoes on or off, and he was flipping out. He couldn't understand why. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, when a person hears good news, their skin becomes fat. They become fatter, actually wider. So that's why they said Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, he would, fitting very well for today's Hayom Yom, when he would say the words in the Kaddish, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach La'olam Amaya Yizbarech, it gave him such a joy that he became fat from it. Rabbi Nachum of Chernobyl was known to be as a very wide chassid, a rebbe. He was a rebbe. I mean, he was a big tzaddik. He became fat from the words of Torah, specifically Yehei Rabba Baruch. Okay, so Nero dies. Vespasian now takes over as emperor, and he was so impressed by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's prophetic prophecy that he would become emperor. He said, "What do you want? I'll give you anything you want." And this is a very controversial statement, but we knew that ultimately to be true, it seems. He said, "Tein li Yavneh v'chachamea, give me the city of Yavneh, which was a coastal town on the Mediterranean, and give me the chachamea, give me the sages, the teachers." And he said, "I'll do that. Just give me that land, let me be in peace, and don't bother us." So he did. Now, perhaps he should have asked for, don't destroy the Beis HaMikdash. But he felt, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, as did most of the spiritual leaders of the time, that the Beis HaMikdash was going to be destroyed. There was no way to stop it. They were going to stop it. It was divinely ordained, and he, whatever, there's no stopping it. So therefore he goes to Yavneh, which comes from the word Yiboneh, to build up. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai he's going to build this, and throughout the next couple decades, he's going to be going around convincing people that the Torah, that Judaism is not limited to the Beis HaMikdash. It's not limited to the Holy Temple and the Holy Temple service. We're beyond that. Most of the mitzvot do have to do with the temple, and as long as the temple is standing. So you would think for sure that's the focal point, and it is a focal point. There's no doubt. But however, our relationship with God goes beyond brick and mortar. Our relationship with God has to do with Torah. Torah is what connects us to God, which is all about my class on Sunday. Somebody once came to the Rebbe and said, she was mad. She said to the Rebbe, are you like some sort of doctor that you can give doctor advice? Are you some sort of architect that you can give architectural advice? Are you some sort of lawyer that you can give law advice? Because most of the questions that were presented to the Rebbe were very mundane questions. And the Rebbe said, no, I'm much more like an architect. In other words, the Torah says the Torah is a blueprint for all of creation. So like an architect creates the blueprint. And the blueprint and the architect tells the contractor and all the other people who work for the contractor exactly what to do. Yeah, you need to build the bricks that look like this. The foundation needs to be over here. But the architect can't do it himself. He doesn't know how to do it. Meaning I can't actually go and perform the surgery. I can't actually go and build the house, but I can look at the blueprints and tell you what to do. I can't do it myself though, but I know exactly what to do. In other words, I can look at the blueprints. So they were able to look at the Torah is beyond all of these things. The Beis HaMikdash and the land of Israel and all these things, they're all integral parts of keeping the Torah and of doing God's will. But right now, God's will is for us not to have the Beis HaMikdash. But we're gonna rebuild Jewish culture and Jewish education. This is what makes us a unique people, is that education is always our focal point. We start sending our kids to school at the age of 3. and they have to learn certain things by the age of 5. Now, these things are fluid, right? Depending on the time, the space, and how you grew up and what your situation is. Obviously, that's not the case for everybody. Perhaps nowadays for 99% of world Jewry, but we have guidelines of how we're supposed to educate, and education is going to be the key to our people's existence and flourishing and our ultimate return to the land of Israel. So Nero dies. Yeah. Okay. Now who takes over? Titus takes over. And he takes over. You should know that Vespasian comes in from the north, who he fights out Josephus, right? Yosef ben Matisyahu Kohen. Josephus convinces Vespasian that I'm going to become I'm a biographer. I can write down things for you, and just keep me alive. And he does that. And Josephus, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, especially anything to do with Roman history, because whatever, they were known to make things look favorable in their eyes slightly, or in the eyes of the people. In 68 AD, Vespasian comes with Titus to take the siege. Now all of the zealot factions head to Yerushalayim, right? So there was all these zealots we talked about. They were fighting. The most notably the Sakari, like the Sicarios. They would kill the people who who showed any kindness or said anything nice to the Romans. Titus takes over his command when Vespasian goes back, and he names a Jewish general named Tiberius Julius Alexander to help with the siege. Tiberius came, he was someone who grew up religious. He dropped the talus for the sword, so to speak. Came from Alexandria, and he was not such a great guy. It could be that this was the general, very famous story, when the Beis Hamikdash was being destroyed. Bilga Bas, no, what's her name? Bilga Bas. It's a very famous story. It's the way that ends the Gemara Sukkah. Bilga Bas. Oh, forgot her name. Very famous story. Very controversial story. She was a girl who was frum. She grew up religious, and she came from a family of Kohanim, of priests. And she banged on the. No, that's not it. It's not the same story. Anyway, it's not the same story. He comes over, and according to Josephus, there's a very famous meeting on the 8th day of Av, which is the night before the destruction of the temple. The temple was destroyed on the 9th day. On the 8th day, Vespasian goes back. So Titus, Tiberius, and a lot of other people get together, and Josephus was there, and they discussed, let's not destroy the temple. It was a beautiful structure. It paid homage to Rome, and Rome wasn't so interested in. They were part of the new way of conquering the world, which post Alexander, which was Alexander the Great, which was, we're not here to just kill everybody. We just want to be paid. We just want our money. So let's not completely destroy this place. But then it ends up being, the majority says we should destroy it because it's going to give the people hope, and they're never going to join us. So let's begin to join us. Titus famously, they had to fight extremely hard. The complete destruction of the temple. The temple was in order to get into the temple, took an immense amount of effort by the Romans. Every inch of the land was fought for. And Titus was actually going crazy. He couldn't handle how difficult, he couldn't understand how difficult it was. He never saw a people fight so hard to protect their land that in the end, he famously rejected the victory wreath that is usually given to a general when he conquers something that was sent by the Roman emperor. He said, I don't want it. I don't deserve it. He goes, these people, I've never seen anybody fight so hard, and clearly their God has abandoned them. And because their God has abandoned them, I didn't really fight. I wanted to fight a God. I came in expecting to fight their God, but I fought a people, and I guess out of respect and out of disappointment that he wasn't fighting their God, he's like, there's no reason why their God shouldn't have been fighting. They should have won. but clearly the God wasn't with them, had abandoned them, and I don't want a victory wreath. What happened was eventually they took all of the. Now this wasn't the end of the revolt. There's going to be 2 more revolts after this. But the Romans began schlepping all of the materials from the Beis Hamikdash back to Rome. So the menorah, the shulchan, not the ark. The ark was buried. All the vestments, all the clothing that we spoke about in last week's parsha of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, etc. So a lot of different things. A lot of it, a famous depiction of the Arch of Titus. If you go to Rome, the Arch of Titus has which was showed all of Titus's battles that he won, and most notably the one that he won in Jerusalem, which has the famous menorah. Now, the menorah, we hold that the menorah did not look like the one on the Arch of Titus, even though that is kosher. We hold by the Rambam, we being Chabad, hold by the Rambam, but the Rambam says it was more diagonal. The branches were diagonal, they weren't curved like this. If you go into the old city, you'll see that the Temple Institute has built a menorah that is kosher for the Beis Hamikdash. They've built all of the materials for the Beis Hamikdash in hopes that the moment Mashiach comes and Hashem builds the temple, we can begin the service right away because we have all of the utensils necessary. Can we go ahead and use it like that? I don't know. It seems like majority of the Jewish world, I think, says no. I know this will be on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure. But nevertheless, it is still a kosher style of menorah. Titus, yeah, okay. They won, and we don't have so much time, so I can't go through everything over here. But, okay, so the Romans then spent the next 2 years seeking out all of the Kanoyim, all of the zealots who tried to kill them. It took 2 years later. Finally, anybody know where after 2 years where it ended up? It ended up the final showdown that actually didn't happen. Does anybody know? There's going to be another revolt after this, but this was like the final. These were all the people who fought against the Romans in the times to protect the temple. Does anybody know where it ended? Where did they run to? The Romans chased them up a mountain, and which was extremely difficult for them to do, and it took an extreme amount of architectural ingenuity to climb up the mountain to get these people, and that was at Masada. And when we got to the top, all the people had killed themselves. That was the end of that. Those were like the last of the zealots. They didn't want to be taken as. Oh, I know what I want to say. So they took all of the materials back to Rome, sold a lot of the materials. Vespasian sold a bunch of the materials, and then what did he do with it? He got the money, and he got money, and then he got 14,000 Jewish slaves from Jerusalem, from Israel, 14,000. And with the money and with the slaves, he built, anybody know? The Colosseum. Yeah. So those of you that go to Rome and look at the Colosseum, it was with our money and our toil. So they did a good job. No, I'm just kidding. It's terrible. Anyway, now the ones at Masada didn't want to be taken as slaves. They knew what was going on, so they decided to kill themselves. Very controversial, halachically controversial. That's what they did. Now, Yavneh starts rising. What they did was, what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, what his MO was about, now how do we apply these traditions of the temple, all these institutions and these traditions that we had in the temple, how do we apply them nowadays? So we do a lot of things to remember the temple, and we do a lot of things in replace of the karbanos, of the offerings that we brought in the temple. Most namely, every day there was 2 offerings that were brought consistently, called the Tamid offering, the consistent offering. One was brought in the morning, Shachris, and one was brought in the afternoon, Bein Arbaim, also known as Mincha. So we started davening Shachris and Mincha, and he taught us, he gave us, eventually a text was composed so that people didn't really daven back in the day. They just said whatever they wanted to say. But in terms of how do I do that same connection that I had in the Beis Hamikdash, I need like a proper text in order to do that. Tefillah means the word connection. So you can pray to God whenever you want to pray to God. In fact, whenever you have a need, you have to call out to God. That's a mitzvah. However, there's also, what about the connection, the daily connection that the Jewish people had with God? There was a time dedicated for a connection called karbanot, which comes from the word krav, to come close. So that was replaced with tefillah, which also means connection. So he composed a text. many other things that he did. The washing of the hands before bread, which resembles the washing of the Kohanim before they went into this week's parsha. The washing of the Kohanim before they did their service. So that's why we wash our hands before bread. Also to remind us about Tuma and Tahara. Yeah, all these different things, impurities, purities, Truma, all these different, these are all there to help us ask questions. So you'll ask a question, why do we do that? Good, I'm glad you asked. So now I can tell you. And now you'll remember the Beis Hamikdash, and now you remember how we got to where we are, and hopefully we will return there again. Now, Rabbi Akiva, a certain man comes at the age of 40 to Yavneh. At the age of, his name is Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva was a powerful personality. Obviously, the most amazing lesson is that, which everybody takes, is that Rabbi Akiva was illiterate until the age of 40. He changed his career at the age of 40. I find nowadays a lot of people change their career around the age of 40. They kind of start figuring it out when they turn 40. I don't know. It's just something that I see. Because 40, you reach a certain level of wisdom and you care a little bit less about what other people have to say, because it really didn't help you, perhaps. So he comes and he becomes a powerful personality. Now, the revolts are not done. But he's in Yavneh and he's soaking up every single word. Hadrian moves into town and he begins his persecutions. Hadrian, now the thing is about Rome, they wanted tight control on that area, and there was still a lot of people that were not interested in what they had to do. And Hadrian was not a good guy. At first, he was okay. Hadrian was okay. He was like what's his name? He was like from the Greeks. No, Antiochus. He was like Antiochus IV. He's like, I have no problem with Jewish people. I have problem with Jewish traditions. I have a problem with their God and their zealousness and all these different things. But like a Jew, I'm okay with a Jew. I got no problem with a Jew. And so Hadrian saw that Judaism was not quelling down, was not going away. So he decided to make enacting a few things, most notably like they did in the Greek times. He says no more Shabbat, no more Bismillah, and no more public learning of Torah, which the Gemara says, the Rabbi Akiva famously said, not being able to learn Torah is like a fish out of water. Eventually it will just die. So they had no choice. The Jewish people said, if we're going to live, those that were still there, we can't have this anymore. So Bar Kochba was a major tzaddik, came from the King David dynasty. He taught Torah barabim. He taught Torah to the public. He was adamant and defiant against the Romans, and he was very Jewish. He leads a revolt, and the revolt is backed by Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva believed him to be Mashiach, and that is, he fights the words of God. He taught Torah. He literally fought the words of God. He sought to unite the Jewish people, and all the different qualities that we know Mashiach needs to have in order to become Mashiach, the Messiah. That's how we know all of the laws of who Mashiach is, thanks to Rabbi Akiva's backing of Bar Kochba. Hadrian decides to send hundreds of thousands of troops to squash this revolt, and this revolt came to an end in the southwest city of Jerusalem, which now is home to a lot of frum Jews. Tremendous. It's actually a very cool place called Beitar. And Beitar was the end of all revolts. They slaughtered tens of thousands of Jews, did not allow us to bury them. Said blood had flowed for over a week, I think, or a month, from the streets of Beitar. So much blood, Jewish blood, that was sown. One of the miracles, and they didn't allow us to bury them for close to 20 years. So by then, but one of the miracles was when we came back, vines had grown over the bodies and had preserved the bodies. Hashem made it so that the bodies were preserved, and we were able to identify and bury all of the people that were there. We have an extra blessing in the Birkat Hamazon to remember that. And I believe it was on Tu B'Av, right? Am I wrong? I believe it was on a Tu B'Av that we buried them. Anyway, that ended all revolts. Ultimately, Hadrian killed a lot of the sages, most notably Rabbi Akiva, flayed the flesh of many of our sages. It was a dark time for the Jewish people. After Hadrian, a lot of the Roman emperors following were not so bad. They were okay with the Jews. Most notably Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, who was more of a philosopher, built a relationship, had a strong relationship with the Jewish people to the extent that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, we're going to speak about right now, was a very close and dear friend. Okay, now what's going on over here? The Jewish, we're on the run. We're on the run, and people are not really remembering Torah, and we're forgetting the oral Torah. Meaning, what does it mean that we're forgetting? We don't have enough people to halt cup, as we say in Yiddish, to remember all of the ways of interpreting the Torah. So let's just recap something very important over here. Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai, and he received after 80 days or more, 120 days, he ultimately started writing down what we have today as the Sefer Torah. Yeah, the Torah that we have in our shul, it's called the Sefer Torah. Moshe wrote it down. He was the first one to write that down. The text of it, the way the alphabet looks, the letters, perhaps changed by Ezra HaSefer, which we spoke about. But yeah, that's what we got. Now, if you look inside the Torah, Moshe didn't just get the Torah, how to write the Torah, but how to interpret the Torah. That is called Torah Sheba'al Peh. Well, okay, within Torah Sheba'al Peh, he got how to interpret the Torah. So Adam's name in the very beginning is written with a huge aleph. There are extra words like honor your mother and honor your father and your mother. Extra words, kavedes avicha ve'es imecha. It's seemingly superfluous. You don't need these words. Ve'es means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But all these different mitzvos and matzos are spelled the same way. A lot of different things. And it lends you to ask, I don't understand what's going on over here. I'm glad you asked. Moshe taught us. Moshe would then tell us the interpretation of what those things mean. That's the first part of the oral Torah. You can look, the hints, it's hinted to in the Torah itself. Second part of the oral Torah is halachas l'Moshe Sinai. There are halachas that God taught, laws that God taught to Moses that are not hinted to in the Torah. For example, the always one that comes to my mind is that tefillin need to be black. Where I don't know that. Where do we even know that? That's just what it is. The Gemara is full of that's a halacha Moshe Sinai. There is no logical explanation for why that is, but that's just something you have to know. And then the third part of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, is that in Deuteronomy, Hashem gives permission for the zakenim, the elders, the chachamim, the sages of each generation to create fences around the Torah and new rabbinic mitzvahs and rabbinic laws. And it has to be clear that these are rabbinic because we're not adding to the Torah. So therefore, when the rabbis make a law or a mitzvah, like lighting Shabbos candles or reading the Megillah, and we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Hashem, thank you for commanding me to read the Megillah. Okay, Hashem never commanded. It's not clear, right? Hashem didn't actually command us to read the Megillah. It's not in the Torah. But he gave permission to the sages, and it has equal weight to the Torah reading, to the Torah. They make exceptions to the rules, so to let you know that these are rabbinic. That is the third and final part. The rabbis, the sages, what they ordain. That's the third and final part of the oral tradition. So there's three parts to the oral tradition, and they have the Sefer Torah. Now, we were forgetting all of these halachas l'Moshe Sinai, how to interpret the Torah, all these different things. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi for 200 years, or about 200 years, well, not 200 years, at the end of about 200 years, so about in the year 200 or so, he compiled what's called the Mishna. So he took drafts of everybody. Everybody was able to take notes in Yavneh, and there are different yeshivas that they went to. They took notes, and he said, we have to compile this. I'm going to, he was one of the wealthiest men in the world. That's probably why he had a good relationship with Marcus Aurelius. Some good, fun stories with Marcus Aurelius and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the name Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Hanassi means the prince. How can he be the prince? Because he comes from Hillel, and Hillel comes from King David. So he was able to keep that name, the prince. It's quite a title. He created the Mishnah, which compiled all of the cases and halachas in the entire Torah and how to interpret the Torah. Now the Mishnah is written in very English, very easy Hebrew. and it was compiled in Israel, the land of Israel. Anybody with the name Tana, those people who are mentioned in the Mishnah are called a Tana. Basically anybody with the title of Rebbe, or just their name is mentioned, just like Hillel, Shammai, Rebbe, Akiva. Okay, it's not that. They are considered. You can consider them a Tana. It's a way to identify a Tana. And it's divided up into case halacha. So what's the case? The case is, the case is, what do we have? When can we say Shema in the morning? When's the earliest? The halacha from sunrise till nightfall. Okay, whatever. That halacha, back and forth. Now within, it's extremely concise, and I will do, God willing, a class. Actually, I want to teach Gemara. I'm developing a Gemara class, how to learn Gemara from the beginning. We'll do that, and we'll talk about that at some time. Now, Rabbi Rav. Oh gosh, really out of time. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had a Talmud, had a student named Abba Aricha, who was also known as Rav. Rav went down to Babylonia, where the Jews were pretty much okay. The Jews that lived in Babylonia, Iran, and these different places were, for the most part, fine, because the Roman Empire didn't really have a big problem over there. In fact, the Persians still kind of had some control, autonomy over themselves. He goes down and he establishes a yeshiva to teach people down there in Babylonia. The yeshiva of Asura, and how to teach people. And he had a contemporary named Shmuel, who opened up a yeshiva in Naharda. And what was unique about how did they study Torah before the Mishnah made its way down to Babylonia? Was essentially whatever parsha of the week it was, they would just the sages or whoever the leaders of the communities would teach them all of the oral tradition together with the parsha, and that's how it went. What was unique about the Mishnah was that all of the Torah was divided up into categories and topics, so you can study any part at any time that you would like. And they are extracting. Eventually, you had another yeshiva in Pumbedisa in Iraq, and they were extracting the categories and the topics, and understanding them and discussing them at any time and any place. So then Torah became so much more accessible, and we were able to have students of the thousands who focused on one area of Torah and another area of Torah. That's why you have different sages who, when it comes to this topic, Tuma and Tahara, you go by Rav and Shmuel. When it comes to cases of Nezikin, you always damages, you always follow Shmuel, I believe. Whatever, there's different, because that's what they emphasized. It was quite unique. Okay, and then we'll stop here. Next time we'll pick up from here, moving on to the Gemara. How did the Gemara develop? Who developed the Gemara? And from there. Anybody have any questions? Oh wow, so many people came in. Okay, no questions. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, my head's up here. Okay, we'll pick up again next week.
Rabbi, real quick, I gotta ask something. So, when you said when the Masada, was it that you said that they climbed up?
Yep.
I remember I was reading that they say that they killed one another, so they didn't really commit suicide.
Or they had, I think, is that what it is? Or they had somebody that went around. Wasn't there one person that went around telling everybody?
Yeah, and then the last person was like, "What happened?"
Right. I don't exactly. They must have left some sort of note. Nobody really. I don't know how people know exactly how they knew. The bottom line is very controversial. It's like you can't really. I mean, it's notable. It's notable, certainly notable, but it's controversial in the Jewish world, in the traditional Jewish world. I don't think Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was. It seems I don't think he was so thrilled. He was the spiritual leader of the Jewish people, not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I don't think he was so thrilled exactly that it went down like that. However, it's part of our tradition. So, okay, so we'll pick up with the Gemara, exactly how the Gemara came back, and the Gemara and the Mishnah combined create what's called the Talmud. Talk more about that. Okay, so in 2 weeks from now we'll go back. All right, everybody, enjoy. I just want to remind everybody on Sundays I'm going to be giving a JLI class. What's it called? Advice for Life. The Rebbe's advice on all areas on business, on money, on family, and all these different things. Everyone's invited to join. I'll send a link when that happens. All right. Be well. Enjoy, everybody. Thank you for joining. Peace and love. Peace and love.